use too many people. Right, let's see. I'll just wait for one more minute to see if some others would join. So. So let's see. Quite some people. Nice question. Okay, nice. Then I would say let's get started. Welcome to this CR rewrite intro session. I hope. Yeah, please ask some questions. In the meantime, I mean, I know in the last session we did some pair programming with Bastian, but this session now lives from not just me talking, but like you also asking questions if I'm too slow, too fast, if I should explain things again, these kind of things. So please give feedback. Right, I'll just share my screen. And I'll probably start with what the event source CR idea is about, what we want to do with it, and what the idea behind it, and then we'll go to the more technical levels. So so there's a blog post, by the way, event source. It's probably not on the first page. Let's see about the content. Oh yeah, content repository is 2.0. It's from last year, actually. Is this one? Oh yeah. So that's actually a good post to understand like what we aim for. So the project has been started already quite a long time ago. We met in 2016, at the end of 2016 in Frankfurt to discuss the first ideas on that together with Matthias Veres, who's very proficient at event sourcing. And then we met last year in September to actually kickstart the code in Kiel. And as you may have known, on the until the NEOS conference this year, we did a lot of experimentation and we have built a working prototype. And now we're actually fleshing out the details and to ensure that we can actually work with we can actually get to some more working state. Right. So the idea about the event source CR is actually we are able to not store the current state only of our nodes and our data in the system, but we are actually able to store all the past information, all the changes you have done to the nodes as well. And by that, we have a very rich source we can use for history undo, for instance, for notifying other people and all kinds of other functionality. I'll just skim or I'll just show through the concepts first, and just starting with the first idea of event sourcing in CQRS. That will be rather quick, and then we go to the actual event source CR. So the difference in the normal domain modeling state is actually we are just we just modify state on some object in some database, we just read from it, and the old state is totally gone. So that's the main difference. And with CQRS and event sourcing, it looks a little different. You actually have a command side and the query side, so for writing and for reading. And normally what you will store here is not just the current state, but also like all the history states. And the way I like to think about it is actually, it looks like this. It's like, well, it reads from right to left. So you have commands first, which is like the user's intention. So it says, please hide a node, please show a node, please create a new node. And there are three different parts here, which we can explain in a bit. Then these commands are turned into events and stored in the event store. So the event store is just a long list of all events happening in the system, basically. And as soon as they have happened in the event store, they have actually taken place. And what we do now then is we actually create projections for that. And the projection is actually like the model you are actually accustomed to is pretty much what a projection is about. And this is what you query using normal SQL then. So that means if you start converting, or the way I like to think about it, if you start converting a non-event source system to an event source system, is actually you move all the code you have into the projection side. You instead of directly mutating your state, you actually encapsulate that in events and commands, and this is what you furthermore store in the event store as well. Right. And there are different like ways to check constraints. They are checked to ensure that a certain state is met. There are hard and soft constraints, but I don't think we need to introduce that in detail now. What is important is that the event store is asynchronous. That means it can happen that it takes some time between the command is set and the query is, and you actually see the result of the command on the query side. But in our case, we currently run this loop pretty tightly, so pretty quickly synchronously in the same request. But we could be able to make this more asynchronous in the future, which would enable lots of possible performance improvements in the future. All right, so I'll just check if some more people joined. Okay, yeah. So please ask questions if I'm too fast, too slow, these kind of things. So for the event source content repository, what we actually are doing for creating a node, for instance, is we have the command again, then the event. This is stored to the event store. And then we have the most important projection is the graph projection, which is basically the way we traverse the node tree in our system. And we call it a graph and not a tree because we have the different so-called content dimensions, which are different languages and these kind of things. We come to that. Right. So the first thing we did is we thought about, so the first important concept you need to grasp is what we call a content stream. And I'm pretty sure you know the concept of workspaces in Neos, which is like a layer of content layered on top of each other. So the user can edit his own personal workspace and then publish to live or publish to review workspace. And that's basically still the same concept. We are just renaming it to content streams for certain reasons I can explain in a bit. But if you read anywhere in the code or anywhere else you read content stream, then you can in your head you can map it to a workspace more or less. So that means that is just a good analogy and a good reference point to keep in mind. And there is one interesting behavior, basically. So currently, what's happening in the old world or in the current content repository, when in the live workspace you create some node and set a property, and then the user starts working on things, and a property is modified in the live workspace, then the user directly sees this change when it was not his node being modified. So if it's two different nodes, actually, it's like a Photoshop layer layered atop on each other. So that means this shine through logic is actually implemented on the query side. So in the current CR, when you do a query, what we do is we query for the user workspace for a certain node, we query for the live workspace for a certain node, and then we have PHP code to overlay that over each other. And you can imagine that is pretty complex. In the event source, in the graph projection, things work a little differently in the sense that actually you will not see what is happening on the live workspace when you started modifying things. So that means it works more like a Git branch, you can imagine. So let's say this is what happened on the live workspace, and then you start your user workspace on a certain point with this content stream, what we call was forked, and then we can start modifying properties. So that means in this case, when I'm at this point here in my user workspace, I am not seeing this live change here. I'm still seeing the state of live of this point in time. We are doing this because we can then very easily we can optimize, let's say we want to be able to performance optimize the system in very different ways in the future. And when we are able to introduce asynchronity, so that an action doesn't need to happen immediately, when we're able to do that, this is a point where we can optimize later on a lot. And we thought, okay, the system must still feel synchronous to the user. So that means the user types something and it's saved. And if he reloads at any point in time, it still needs to be shown, because it would be totally weird if your own content you just created is gone away and then it's recreated after a bit, if you don't see it anymore after reload. But it's not a big deal if you don't see the changes happening from other users immediately. It could be that you see them a few seconds later, and that would be totally fine. So that's why we came up with this idea of actually explicitly branching off, basically. And the nice thing is that we, at this point, when we merge, we know there can be a possible conflict, and we need to solve this possible conflict. That means you are only allowed to merge back if nothing has changed on live or on your base workspace, on your base content stream in between. As soon as something has changed, you are not able to merge. Indeed, what you need to do is you need to rebase your changes, which means pretty much like in Git, you take these three things, these three events, you start and you create a new content stream from this point in time with these three events on it. And then you are basically having this state, and then you can apply. So that means it's more like working with Git. You have an explicit rebase operation, which we do in the background automatically, or which we will do in the background automatically. And by this, we are able to scale a lot better with more users and so on. That's the idea about it. Questions so far before I enter a new topic? Nope.
That's just one quick thing, that we don't have enough room in the Hangout. So
okay, 1 second.
Any way to stream that somehow?
Yeah. It is streamed anyway. It's just I just need to figure out the URL. Let's see, YouTube page. I'll just put it in the. This is so yeah. This is if people want to join. Let's just put it in the oops, discuss. I'll just put it in the discuss if people want to join this one. Here we go. If this as the Hangout is full, please join for watching only and ask questions on project CR. So please, anybody, please watch the channel a bit, and if people have questions, just relay them to me, please. Right. So, any other questions to this concept of the content stream? So, the important thing to remember is the content stream is almost like a workspace, and the reason why these two things are different is the content stream is internally when this rebase happens, you actually have something like two content streams. You have a current content stream, which is the one you see, and then you have the next content stream, which is the one which is currently being rebased. And as soon as all operations are up to date, then we are switching that. So that means the workspace is just pointing to one content stream, to the most recent content stream. So that's like the difference in concept. And what this means is if you have no local pending changes, you also don't have a content stream, or you don't need a content stream. So that's how we can scale well with the number of people in the system, the number of users in the system. It's not relevant how many users, how many accounts you're having, but it's just important how many people are actually concurrently editing. And that's usually a lot lower number than the number of people totally in the system. Right, so that's the difference between that. Go. Right. So then we talked. So then there's one thing to keep in mind, which is what we call currently a node. We call in the future a node aggregate. But to explain that, I have to explain different content variants in different dimensions. The idea behind dimensions in Neos is to say, okay, this content exists in various forms. And the most obvious dimension, the one probably most of you have already used, is a language dimension to say, okay, this content exists in German and English. And it turns out that we didn't properly formalize this concept in in Neos, in the old code. It's basically, it's working pretty much, but it's never properly formalized with the proper wording, so that we have dimension value, dimension values, and dimensions, and it's never really clear what we mean by that. And that's why we have explicit wordings found for that. And this is what I would like to go through here. So a dimension is a single axis of content variation. So that means the dimension language has the value German and English, for instance. So that is what basically is a dimension in the new wording. It's pretty much the same like the old one, I would say. What is now new is that we explicitly give the thing, if you have more than one dimension, the thing which happens by that, give it the name, and that's the dimension space. So that means if we have 2 dimensions, we have a 2-dimensional dimension space. And it sounds funky, but it's, I mean, you know, if you just have a if you just have a language dimension, it's just the dimension and the dimension space are basically the same. And now we are introducing something called a dimension space point, which is a single point in this dimension space. So that means it's like saying we are in the English language or in the German language. So that's it. And the last concept we are having is the so-called allowed dimension subspace, because if you have more than one dimension, there are certain cases which don't make sense. So for instance, you might want to allow French in France and German in Switzerland, but not German in France, for instance. So certain combinations might not make sense. And in the current CR, we have a way to restrict that. And that's still, it is still possible in the new one. And this is what we call the allowed dimension subspace. So it's important to remember, for your user's perspective, the bigger a dimension space is, the more content you have to produce. So usually you will have just very limited number of dimensions in the system. But the CR should work in a way to not have any limit on 3 dimensions or anything like that. But it should just work. So that means we have a 0-dimensional space. That's just, you know, we don't have any language configured. That means all the content is in the same dimension. That's just a single point, basically. If we have just language, for instance, it might look like that. We have 3 values, French, German, and Swiss German. And if we have a 2-dimensional space, we could have country and language. We have French, German, and Swiss as language again, and France and Switzerland as a country. And now this spans 2 coordinates, and the allowed dimension subspace is actually the points in the middle here, right? So it's saying, okay, what options are available there, and this is actually configured in the settings. Right, and then we have a funky feature which we call dimension fallbacks, which we already had in the current content repository, and it is actually quite a difficult point to get around. The idea behind it was, or the observation was, that Swiss German and German will probably share most of the content, but not all of them, but just most of it. So that means we have the idea, or we had the idea in the old CR to have dimension fallbacks, although we didn't call them this way, but this is effectively how they worked. So you could say, okay, basically Swiss German always shows the German content except something is specified on top of it. And this and these fallback rules is actually what is specified in this orange line here, right? So we are saying we are actually falling back from Swiss German to German German, and the same here in this 2-dimensional space. And what is interesting is, like in the 2-dimensional space, something happens here, because we might have fallbacks in different dimensions, actually. So that means there's also a fallback resulting in this dimension space here in the middle, basically in the cross product. And that's actually what you might have heard, for instance, Bernhard talking about. It's the intra-dimensional fallback graph. That's actually the orange line. It's inside one dimension. That's the one you configure. And then you have the inter-dimensional fallbacks. That's the one which the system figures out for you based on this configuration, and that's what the system uses. So that means in one dimension, they are always the same. In 0 dimensions, of course, as well, there you can't have any fallbacks. In 2 dimensions, the orange one, the intra-dimensional fallback, is the one which is configured, and the inter-dimensional is the one which the system works with and which specifies the actual behavior from the side of the system. Right. So that's dimensions. So important is that in terms of dimensions, actually, behavior didn't change compared to like the current content repository. It is just that naming has changed a lot. It has been clarified a lot, and we have actually now a sound model to think about dimensions. That's the thing what happens here. And don't let yourself scare from these funky words like dimension space or dimension space point or these kind of things. It's just the wordings which we thought would be the most explicit saying what actually the things are. Right? So the dimension space points is just one of these bubbles here. Questions so far? No questions? It's okay? Too fast, too slow? Okay, then I think that's for now. So you can read more on the concept here. I think I would now just go to the current state and show you a little bit about like where we are currently. And as said, please ask questions as much as you can. Right, so we have been working on a fork for a very long time. But the problem with the fork is it's very, very hard to install. It was very hard for others to contribute. So we changed the working mode about a month ago to actually have a set of installable packages you are able to put in to install into a normal Neos master installation. And this is currently in this Neos, so we don't have just one package, but currently it's 3 of them, and it might be also 4 or 5 in the longer run, so it might be some more. So we have this content repository development collection, where we work on and which contains code being all the packages. If you install them, you will get an event source content repository. That's like what's actually happening. So here's a getting started guide, how you can get this running. You have to adjust your composer JSON a little, and we still have currently a few. So you still need a patch to Neos currently. That's something we will hopefully merge pretty soon after the next release, so that it will be included in the release in April next year. And we also have still currently a small patch for the Neos UI. These 2 things will go away pretty soonish. And then it's really a normal master installation of Neos, and then you install this collection, this content repository dev collection on top, and you get the event source CR. That's the basic idea behind it.
Just one quick question. The requirements for PHP and the database are?
Yeah, it's good point. It's PHP 7.2, and currently we are mostly testing with MariaDB with more recent versions, which means I think 10.2 something. So let me check.
Because I tried it and I have some SQL issues with 5.7 MySQL.
Oh, okay. Actually, it might be that might be too old. So what you need it's called recursive CTEs, and this is a feature of more. I think it's MySQL 8.0 introduced that. And actually, exactly that would be helpful to add to the README certainly. Yeah. So good point. So it's yes, and actually I'm developing on MariaDB on let's see if I can get the version here somehow.
I can check and update the README.
Yeah, and I'm currently on MariaDB 10.3 something locally. Right. So we have this dev collection basically. What is also I'm just thinking exactly, and if you install that, then you can actually run. You can there's a migration command. So if you have a site up and running, the old demo site, for instance. So currently we only tested with the demo site. We didn't try it at all with any other site so far. That's something we will do as soon as the demo site is more feature complete. If you run this content repository migrate command, what will happen? It will read the old node data table and it will create events from that. And it does that in a very nice form with lots of variable dumps, which I don't know. I don't remember anymore why they are in there. Probably doesn't make sense anymore. But as soon as this runs through without any fatal error, then we are done. And what has happened now in the background is a lot, actually. We have, let's just show you in the database table. So we have, so we still have our old node data table, which is not used anymore, but it's just it's still existing. But so we don't lose anything, but it's not used anymore at all. Then we have the let me think. Then we have the event. Oh no, that's wrong. Events to event. So that's actually the events which were created by reading all the node data information. So if I expand this, it starts with the type. It starts with content stream created, root workspace created, root node was created, and then we basically add a node aggregate and we add the nodes to this aggregate. So that means the difference is the node aggregate is basically so all nodes belong to an aggregate are the different localizations of a certain node. So that means like the homepage is created initially, and then the different language versions of the nodes are added to this one. So you see, this is all we get currently, all kinds of events.
One question. So is it actually a goal that you should be able to transfer seamlessly to the new CR? So you would have some kind of importer, and then you could get rid of the old data in the old CR?
Exactly. So the idea is you should be able to run this content repository migrate run, and it should behave exactly as before. It might be that you need to adjust some Fusion code, but we are trying to reduce that to a minimum. You will definitely need to adjust if you have some custom PHP code working with the node interface. Mm-hmm. But like if you're only using an integrator, or I mean only, but so if you're not creating any PHP code on your own in a Neos project, then you should just be able to run this this migration command, and you shouldn't see any difference basically, except that under the hood the behavior has changed a lot. But you shouldn't see like the page should still render as before and these kind of things.
Could you maybe later just or give an example, because the node interface is probably heavily used.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, remind me on that. So as said, we have these events, and what also happens that the projection is built up, and that's this content graph, what we call. And I don't want to show that in detail. Just quickly, you see it has properties in here. Node identifiers, node aggregate identifiers. It does not have any hierarchy information that is in hierarchy relation, and here we have information about the hierarchy, which is admittedly not well readable. So, but I don't want to explain this graph projection in detail for now. That's more advanced stuff we can go in later. And important is if we do that and if we visit the front end, let's just see. No. You have to trust me that it actually does something, because it's the new stuff, and actually you see it's the new one because we can't render the footer yet, so that's still a bug. So, but you see the page is still shown. You can generally navigate the page. There are some detail problems still. I think the shortcuts are broken. Are they working now? Exactly. So shortcuts are currently still broken, but like overall, the page should just work like before. Oh, and the home link is broken actually. So, so there's still some rough edges, but like overall, generally, like the content should just appear on the page. Right. So now let's probably look a little behind this.
Sorry, I would have one more regarding the database structure.
Yeah.
You showed the events, but can you show a project to get a feeling how that looks like in the database? To just see something and.
You mean how the projection looks like?
Yes.
Actually, this is what I just showed is the projection. So content graph is the projection. So the main one we are currently using. So this is like the nodes. It's just, it contains properties as before, basically. What it doesn't contain is any node path, but you have to remember, for instance, this relation anchor point. You have to go to the hierarchy relation table, which contains the structural information. And now I can basically query for the parent node, for instance, by this one. And I see, okay, it's the meter.
That was stored in one table is now stored. Did you say that way?
Exactly. What was stored before in one is now stored in two, and we will add some more. So restriction edge will come for show and hide. Yeah. Reference relation is for references. So to store the reference properties extra. But so it's a bunch of tables now, but the main ones are hierarchy, relation, and node. Yeah.
Okay. And one more question. Mm-hmm. Maybe I got it wrong, but the node will be read.
So I didn't understand it now.
The node identifier will be removed, or
the thing is the node identifier is also something which is not really clear naming wise. So it will just change from node identifier to node aggregate identifier. That's the difference from the old to the new world, basically. So you can just replace in your head always where you read node identifier by node aggregate identifier, and that's the actually more correct name. And currently in the CR, we still have a node identifier, which is different than the node identifier from before, and this one will be removed because we don't need it actually anymore. So that's something we will remove in the upcoming work to get this one rid of the system, to get this out of the system, basically. Yeah.
And just for better understanding, sorry for asking.
No, that's fine. That's good.
What is the replacement for the node path, or how do I check? I mean, to debug things like that.
It still exists. So maybe let's just show. Let's go to the read side, and things get a little more clear.
Okay.
So it's just the node path does not appear in the database anymore. That's the difference. Not so directly, basically. The old node interface will become the new traversable node interface. It does not contain any methods for writing things, but for reading, it's pretty similar. So that means it still has things like, for instance, get properties, or get property, or get node name, or has property is hidden, get label, these kind of things, right?
And this is basically the replacement for the node interface we talked earlier about.
The traversable node interface is the replacement for the old node interface, exactly.
All right, thanks.
And here you have then methods like find parent node, find node path. Find node path is the one we wanted to know. And the reason why it's called find node path, so the idea behind this is everything which is get something is very quick, that's already existing. Everything which is find something is something which might be a slower operation, which means it may involve a database round trip. We are caching that very aggressively, but it might still happen that this goes to the database. So that's why they are named with find node path as an example. And if you do that, then you get a node path back, and this node path just contains the string basically of all the segments in there. Exactly. So that's the main interface. Actually, we are working it. As the user, as the integrator, is this traversable node interface, which corresponds to the new to the old node interface, to the read side of it. And actually, this is something which so after the next release is out, or the release in December is out, we actually the old node will already implement the new traversable node interface, so you can actually start migrating your code signatures to the traversable node interface in Fusion, for instance, to have no breaking then at a later point in time when you try out the new CR. So if you try out the CR, then you can actually switch back and forth pretty easily. That's the idea behind it.
Very cool.
Of course, if you create content with the new CR, then this will not be created in the old CR. So that's like, that's something we want to enable people to try it out quickly, but still, of course, as soon as you start creating content only in the new one, then of course,
one more stupid question. So I could have old data in the old one and new data in the new one, and it would work?
Yes, although you cannot. So if you install these 3 packages, you will only be able to access the new data.
All right. So I have to migrate, and then I will have everything in the new one, and from that point forward, I work in the new one.
Yeah, the idea is, but still, if something goes wrong with the migration, or if you can try it out on your local laptop. If it doesn't work, you just throw away these few packages and hopefully create a bug report, and then you still have everything and you can continue working. That's the idea behind it. That you don't, so that to make it easier to try out. Right. So I'm just thinking what we can do. So I think there are now 2 possible options. The one is I could, or actually 3 options. So I could explain a little more how it works for the user in terms of like how you can work with the traversable node. So that would be one way. I could show you how the fusion changed and these kind of things. I could explain to you how the stuff works a little more internally. Or we could also in code follow like what happens when you actually modify a property from start to end. So actually typing in the backend something, and then what happens until this shows up in the projection. That's something I could also show. That's probably the most deep divey thing we can do. But yeah, any particular preferences in any of these directions?
So personally, I'd be very interested in. Oh, sorry. You go. No, go ahead.
So, well, since this is an onboarding session, I think the most interesting thing, and I might be wrong, is that how can I test it?
Yeah, good point.
And what do I have to adjust? Probably my custom code, like or something, to have a very basic blog page, for instance, and test it with the new CR.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I wanted to suggest the same, and especially what are the breaking changes for the integrator. So
yeah, cool. So actually, I don't fully know. I don't fully know yet because I didn't test it on another site yet. But that's of course something. So be prepared that things will go wrong there. What you need to do is, so you need to add these few packages to Composer.json, and then if you have content dimensions in your site, then you need to rewrite the way the content dimensions are configured. So beforehand, it was a flat list, so you had like content dimensions, language, and then you had all the values like flatly listed on one each other. Now the specializations are now like indented, so it's like a tree. One thing currently I would actually, so I'm having in mind, I would like to use the CR first for pages which don't use any languages. So while the code is aware of all languages and dimensions fallbacks and all these things, I would first actually like to get the CR out for people not using content dimensions. So that would be for me the first step. After we have done this, and this works well and stable and all that, I would like to go to the one step further, which is saying, okay, you can use one content dimension like a language, you don't use fallbacks yet. Right? So that is just the simple German-English case, for instance. And then we could go for the case, okay, one dimension with fallbacks, which is what we see here with ENUS, ENUK, and then we have the fully fledged case with multiple dimensions with potential fallbacks. So I would like to go like these steps to get to a working state. So the CR code actually can do multi-dimensions with fallbacks, at least in theory, but of course, we only tested it very roughly. So I would like to increase complexity from easy to hard. So best would be actually projects or sites which don't use dimensions. Then you wouldn't need to configure anything.
I have a quick conceptual question. So the number one request I get recently is, can we have different dimensions for different sites in a multi-site installation? So I was wondering if we reconfigure this, did you think about having those site-specific?
So yeah, we thought about it, but it's actually it turns out to be really, really hard.
Okay.
So that's something I'm still very much unsure about. What we thought about is to be able to restrict the allowed dimension subspace in the different sites, but not the dimension space as itself. So that means you would still have the same dimensions in all sites, but you could say in this page you only have only French and German allowed. In this page it's English and Swiss or something. But that would be a possible option. The thing is, that's probably how do I say? I think if we go this route, actually, it will be very easy to say, yeah, I want to have custom configuration per site as well, for instance, or these kind of things. So I'm actually not sure at which level is the right one to solve that problem. If it's actually the right level to solve it on the CR level, or if we actually, for instance, need to solve it on a Neos on a flow configuration level even. So
yeah,
so that's why we didn't go that way yet, and we try to get the scope somehow down and not up, which you try. Yep.
Okay.
Right. So then we run this flow content repository migrate run, and then actually things should. So yeah, and then you need to. So then the front end should actually work. I can show you I'm just thinking, I think on a demo side, actually, we don't have any modifications currently, so nothing changes for the integrator. What we do behind the scenes is that, so that all flow query operations, so for instance, let's check for instance, the children operation. This is, so the children operation is the one, this is in the Neos core, right? So this is what you do, f something dot children or dot flow query of children, and before so this is what this core change is still about. Before this core change, it all used the old node interface in here, and now it is using this so-called traversable node interface here, and it uses find child nodes and not I don't know, get child nodes, or how it was called in the old world, basically. So that's how we basically how there are no changes for the integrator, because these operations use the new interface already, or will use the new interface as soon as we merge this patch set after the next release. But that's how things will not change for users. But if you have custom flow query operations, that's something you will need to adjust. So you would, for instance, go to everything, replace all node interface by traversable node interface. Then you will see that certain methods don't exist anymore, like get children or something, and then you have to find the corresponding node, like the corresponding method, like find child node. So that's something which you would need to adjust, for instance, in your own flow query operations.
But does it make sense if you explain why the footer is not working on the current site?
Yeah, sure. Actually, it's that's a small thing. It's just something we just didn't get around yet, which is the fusion root. Exactly. So the footer, right? So the footer, how it works actually is with a shared node, with a shared footer, right? So what we do here is we start on this site, and we take the footer of the site node, and then we extract the path from it. And actually, this part is not working yet, because actually this would need to call find path, find node path, the one we've just seen. So that's one part of the problem, and the other one is that so the content collection takes the where are we? Content collection vendor. Oh no, actually it's this. Let me check nearest content collection. Node helper. Exactly. What they do here is actually saying node get node, and get node currently allows a full relative path. And that's actually something we don't support yet, and I'm not sure if we should actually support that, or if we rather provide an API or a helper method which does that, because it's multiple steps, because it's saying I want to go 5 level up 5 levels up and 3 levels down, for instance, which can be a quite intensive operation. So it should be still doable, but I wouldn't implement it in the traversable node itself, but I would rather have some utility where you can say, you know, you give in a traversable node, you give in a relative path, and it will just traverse up and down to find the right node.
So the problem is that node get node allows you to fetch nodes that are even parents of the
parents, or in this case, exactly. If you start with slash, it starts from the side, which is a pretty ugly hack in the current world, so to speak. And also you can go 3 levels down from the current one. It's just happening not very often, but in the case of a shared footer, it's a pretty common case.
Yeah.
So that's an example of, you know, that's actually not hard to fix from my point of view. So I could probably do it in a few hours or something, and it would be totally clear for me what I would like to do to get it fixed. But that would be also something, you know, where people could actually, you know, where I could sketch out things and then people could actually try getting their hands dirty with it.
But on the Fusion side, the property underscore path is pretty nasty anyways. So what would be the nice way to do that?
The question is so actually what you could so you could do something like, I don't know, if I could get the traversable node and then I could do something like find path, right? So that would actually work. The question is, it might make sense still to support this special property, just to not break every site, but to be backwards compatible to a certain extent. Or we just say, or we introduce a new Fusion operation like this would be also an option. It's probably the cleanest one.
Yes, I think so. I mean, we can still support the one, but we should deprecate it.
Deprecate it, definitely. Yeah. Good point.
But this is definitely something I have to do and adjust. I have to adjust my Fusion code at any point in time to fully support the new CR, right?
Well, actually, ideally not.
Automatic migration. I don't know. I don't know if this is possible.
Yeah, it certainly. I mean, we can definitely search for this thing and replace it by .path, for instance, right? So I think we can. So far, the demo side has had no modifications at all. So the demo side, this is the only thing which currently breaks in the demo side. And where we would need to do some work to actually support that. So, but and of course, I imagine, you know, as soon as we test other sites and they use other Fusion objects, like, or they use them in a different way, we will probably stumble across a few more edge cases which we currently don't support. But I think actually we can go very, very far in supporting all that. So that you actually don't need to change your Fusion code. And then we can deprecate some parts, or we should deprecate some parts, like this evil underscore path property, for instance. But I think we can deprecate it and provide a proper migration path with the proper migration, with the normal migration tooling available we are having, and so on. So the goal should be, and we are not very far from that goal, to have your Fusion just run. So that
very nice.
And as said, if you have PHP code, then this needs modification because you need to adjust your flow query operation. You might need to adjust your EEL operations, or if you have a custom importer, like everything which creates nodes, that will work a lot differently because you cannot just go on the node anymore, but you have to create commands, which is a little different. But that's like the main. But you know, that's the more advanced use cases, a little further behind, I would say, or further. On the radar. Yeah.
Cool.
Right. So what would be still important to me in the collection? So as said, it should explain all steps. Hopefully, we also have behavioral tests, quite a lot of them. So you can please and they're also running through. As said, you can just try it out. Currently, what I know is that it all works with the demo side, and that's the state I'm intent to keep for now. I would really love to have, for instance, our own company website running on this productively in a few months, let's say before the conference. That would be my dream goal, so to speak. I'm not sure if we'll be able to reach that because that depends a lot on like other people to join the effort. And I think we have tasks for different sizings. So stuff like this fixing the shared footer. That's probably something I could sketch out in a few bullet points, and then it's actually most people of you could probably implement that. And I mean, more advanced stuff like showing, hiding recursively, these kind of things, what Bas and me did just an hour ago. That's probably something which takes some time to get used to, obviously, because it's more crazy things. Yeah, so that would be like the main idea, I would say.
Could you maybe go through the feature set for the first version one more time, so
sure.
You get a clear view what to expect, so it's not really current. Everything will not work.
Yeah. So we should, I mean, creating, editing, deleting nodes basically works. It doesn't work in the UI currently, but it works like on the technical level. So what currently works actually is you can actually change properties in the UI as well, and that works. So you can upload images, you can set properties, but that's about it. Like how you can modify your site. So creating, editing, deleting nodes is certainly a thing. Shortcuts should of course work. Querying on Fusion should work. That's something we need to test. Yeah, moving of nodes is something which should actually which we need to test. So it's not connected to the UI yet. So we have quite some features which are already implemented but not yet exposed to the UI. Hiding nodes is the one we are currently working on. History won't be part of it in the first version. We will have all the information, but I don't see any history module being done. Yes, these kind of things, I'm not sure yet. That's something I think we can move apart, and which is then easy to do, basically. Yeah, one new feature actually will be to be able to resolve references from the other side. So, if you have a node, like a node, and this needs you have an article and this has a tag, for instance, or tags. Currently, it's not easy on the tag page to know which articles have this tag. You need to need to use Elasticsearch for this, for instance. And this is something we can answer directly in a performant way with this reference relation table, which we have here. So that's something which is actually a new feature compared to now. Yeah, and then there's a lot of things. So as said, I mean, we'll hopefully start with no dimensions like exposed to the outside, although it's implemented in a way that dimensions and dimension fallbacks and so on should work. But then we also need to do stuff like node repair, for instance, node migrations, these kind of things, which are not yet started. So as said, I cannot promise anything because it depends very much on how many people join, and how many people join will also affect my motivation in a positive or negative way, for instance. And this also this will then we'll see how far we get. But yeah, the idea is, so ideally we will get a pretty well-working version in the next months when people step up and help with the effort. It will not have undo redo exposed to the user in any way. You shouldn't probably use it as a start with many dimensions because that's something I would rather like. I would like first the simple cases to work. Yeah, that's probably the two biggest things I would not support right now when I'm thinking about it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I'm not sure, should we do another of these sessions, like a little more in depth, like code-wise, a little more to the code? That would be an option. Or, I mean, that's something we can figure out asynchronously, but it would be helpful to me, please, if you could leave feedback either in the Slack or in Discuss on the post, that would be extremely valuable, just that we can see if this format works, if you would like to see something else or some further topics. So I'm doing many things to get more people on board, and if you even want to help out with some part, then please get in touch. That would be awesome. Yep.
Yeah, and there will be a weekly on every Thursday to get more people on board and learn more about the topic.
Yep, definitely. Okay.
Might I have a question too?
Yeah, sure, of course.
Could you go through the to the main selling points of the new content repository approach? So in the long run, I know there's easier undo. There's a easier history.
Yeah. So
but you know the system a lot more than me.
Yeah. So that's like the most user-facing thing, I would say. What will happen to the normal user is he will see a really huge speed up in uncatched scenarios, because currently, as you traverse the node hierarchy, like the current CR, if you fetch 1,000 nodes on a page for a long page, or for instance, in an uncached way, we actually have more than 1,000 SQL queries being done in the database. And actually, the cache takes away a lot of pressure there, but there are cases which are hard to optimize because they are essentially uncached to a certain extent. And with the new CR, we're actually having ways to be able to fetch a bunch of nodes which we need for a certain rendering at once. So we're actually doing 1 or 2 database queries, and this is constant no matter how many nodes we are looking for. And so that's something which which we are already seeing by measuring. So that is something which I expect. And then I hope that we get, by having this information, what has changed when, this is an extremely valuable source of information. So that means it can help for instance, for Elasticsearch indexing. It can help for, I personally would like to have something like, to have a to-do list. So let's say something was written in German, and then somebody translated it, and then it was adjusted in German. I would actually like to have a to-do list as the translator to know, oh, this thing has to be still adjusted, and we could actually show to the user, okay, these are the few things which has changed, which you need to adjust to the new language, as an example. And I think, or we are trying to build the CR in a way that we can pretty easily, not totally easily, but pretty easily also use it standalone of Neos and even standalone of Flow. So you could hopefully use it in a certain point in the future after we have the first versions out and so on, really standalone, for instance, in the Symfony project. And I think then it's an extremely stable and reliable store for your like business critical data. That would be like my ideal idea. So let's say you have the people, I don't know, who have a product database, for instance. That's also extremely valuable to know history of things, to know what has changed when, by whom, these kind of things. So I hope that we can evolve it into a direction that is really useful for a lot more use cases than just throwing content in there. But that you can actually, that it reaches a maturity with where we are not right now, obviously, but hopefully we will be at some point if we get momentum there and get this out of that. This could be the thing which you store your data on if you really want to trust it in terms of what has changed when, these kind of things. So.
I see.
Can I get
that? Thank you.
Overall idea, I would say. Yeah.
Can I add to that? I think the last point definitely. I mean that is kind of also my dream. It's a bit like Git for content. Hopefully at some point, and there's so many cool use cases. Concretely, for me, the major selling point would be if you now work with Neos especially with a large site. There's a lot of these gremlins still, and I'm sure you all have used the node repair command, and I'm sure you have failed with it because it's really hard to fix things after the fact. Sometimes it's just very complex, and if we don't know what happened, it's really hard to fix it. And this won't be solved automatically by changing it to be event source, but at least with it maturing, we can hopefully get rid of this node repair command. And if there was a bug, we could fix it and then kind of replay the stream, and you get the fix for free, more or less. All these stability features, that is my major...
yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, that's true. The current CR, as you write, there are scenarios where it performs very poorly. So for instance, if you have millions of nodes and you move them one level down, that's something where performance just crashes away currently, and this is something which is very fast in the new one, which is just updating one database column basically. But of course, it's always about trade-offs. So it's we are trying to so now that we know how the big use cases look like, we also trying to have a performant and stable and well-defined behavior. What Bastian just said, and that's what we're aiming for.
And my last point for like an extension standpoint of view is the whole projection thing. So also for stability things, like, or for performance improvements, like currently to create routes, we have to traverse the tree because every node knows its segment in the URL. To get the whole URL for a node, you have to traverse the tree, and that is quite expensive. So we cache it at certain points, but that has other drawbacks. And if you flush the caches and create a huge sitemap, for instance, it's really, really slow. Things like this can be really nicely improved by just listening to the events that are interesting for you and just create a table only with node to the URL, things like this. So the projection, not only for the core features, but also if you want to create your own API based on subset of the nodes, that is also a really nice potential feature.
So basically what we are doing is we are trading storage size in terms of the database with performance at read time. So we are trying to pre-compute certain things. So that's what event sourcing and CQRS allows us to. It allows us to pre-compute different subsets, different parts of the values in a way that we can easily query it for certain use cases. And of course, this will mean the database storage will increase and it will get bigger in this sense. But we hope that we can by that still optimize for a lot of unknown use cases we don't know for yet. And that's the difference, because currently, we're currently at a barrier where we know, okay, if you want to touch the CR, you really need to know what you're doing. And even if you do it, it's very likely that you'll break things because it's complex.
If I understand correctly, this would also speed up development, because when you have this event to make your protect just for one use case, you can focus on that and you don't need to have the big picture always in mind, right? So
I mean, there are certain use cases, of course, which are hard, like this graph use case, which is the main use case we are building. And this is not something, so this is a very hard one, obviously. But the idea is that probably it will be one or two hard ones, so to speak, and then a lot of easy ones, which take also burden away from this difficult use case from the hard part, basically. So that's like the meta idea behind event sourcing and CQRS, that we are able
just to understand. So I could do things like, I don't know, have a statistical projection, just for my custom project use case. That is the end point or the start point for an API for an app or something, things like that. Yeah, so I don't have to go through everything, all events. So I make my projection for that use case, and I can deliver that quite quickly to another endpoint.
Yeah.
What I also think is that making Elastic obsolete in many cases is also a major selling point. So we would use Elasticsearch only for full text indexing, and would not have to use it in very simple cases for fetch structure information and relations. So this is also a thing that makes developing much easier and faster, and reduces dependencies.
Yeah. And I mean, currently we are working with the relational database, MySQL or Postgres, of course, because that's what most people run on. But I could also imagine, that as you grow millions of nodes, so at a certain scalability level, we will probably look into stuff like Neo4j, into graph databases for storing these things. The nice thing is it won't change how it feels to you as a user. So that's what we're really working hard to, and what looks quite promising. So I'm not sure yet, when things will break in terms of performance, but we have thought about a lot of these cases, and I'm quite hopeful. Well, hopeful to say that we are able to deliver something which we can really easily tune to a variety of use cases, also high performance use cases, because currently we have a big thing of code which was so the current CR, I don't want to bash it, because the thing is, I think it was extremely valuable to understand what we actually need to do, what we actually need in a sense. So we couldn't have created the event source CR without having the current one in detail and seeing how it behaves in the real world. So that's extremely, extremely valuable. But of course, we also know what are the limits of the current CR in terms of performance, in terms of new features which are not fitting well into there, and so on. And it's the same as with the React UI, so to speak. I would say there we also did the full technical switch, basically, which the user didn't really notice, but which now enables lots of innovation in this part of the code and lots of extensibility and these kind of things. And now that we did it for the UI was somehow, it was hard because of technical challenges, but it was easier because it didn't touch persistent data. So the CR is different in a sense because it touches the core data of the system, which makes it that it should rather work. But if we have these 2 points together, I think we will have a really flexible core basis. That would be the hope of it. Let's see when this will be the case. Right. So further questions? Anything? Okay.
Can you say something about the current state of the development collections, or where are the loose edges? When I worked on or tried to get into it on the sprint, I ran into too much issues I couldn't solve at that point. So it was not, I could not solve easy problems because too many things were flying around at that point in time.
Yeah.
Is there a list now where we can just tackle one problem at a time, or what is the state?
I mean, I hope that the README is working actually and up to date and really gives you a functioning state. I mean, I think, Bastian, you can say something about it because you worked on it and you also had some pain points recently, right?
Yeah, I keep updating it. I just added the requirements, for example, because I didn't have that in mind, that you need this database, of course. Apart from that, it should work, but I had the same issue that it's really hard if you try it out to know is that it's something that is expected to break or not. I think we have two major issues still. If we can fix them, then at least the most of the experience already feels nice, and that is well, of course, the footer thingy, because that renders an error in the front end basically, and publishing doesn't work, and if we can get that to work, I think most of the important features already work.
Well, the publishing only works with publish all currently. It's not able.
But even that doesn't work right now. So that's no. It's
okay. Yep.
Yeah, I also installed it that morning, and it was actually well documented. I think
that's good.
Not hard to get started. I also did a PR for some adjustments for the README. But basically, it worked out. So
yeah, as I said, I think like topic wise. So we are trying to get a grip in terms of starting. So we're having a project board in this PR collection, and we have we have issues for the bigger things. We are still missing out issues for the smaller things, like this footer thing being broken and these kind of stuff, right? So, but that's just because it's hard for me to get all these different strengths in my head, basically. So that means if in doubt, just ask quickly, like with the footer and the CR rewrite, and then I can just say, yeah, it's a bug, please report it, and then I can also just write a few things on it, and then you could start working on it. So I try to support where I can there, of course. Okay. So please try it out again, and give feedback, please. And if somebody would be more interested in joining the effort, then that would be highly welcome. Cool.
Thank you very much for the introduction.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll see. We'll write each other in discuss in Slack. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.